Hello and welcome to Tonnau Talks. Today we're going to be talking about helping kids to feel. My name is Dr. Karis John. I'm a Senior Specialist SEBD Lead Educational Psychologist for Neath Talbot Local Authority, and I am part of the Tonnau team, which is a service that provides support to parents and carers and children across the local authority. Today joining me for Tonnau Talks is
My name is Caitlin Davis and I'm an Assistant Educational Psychologist working as part of the Tonnau team.
As you can see, this is a podcast, but also we do have visuals on this YouTube video. As you can see, there's a QR code that is on this screen. Please feel free to scan that using your mobile device so that you can have access to our other live sessions that we will be producing throughout the year. Also, you'll be able to see on our YouTube channel, there are previous Tonnau Talks that we've done, which we often refer to in our up and coming Tonnau Talks, because it helps just kind of build up that kind of picture of psychology to help you understand the needs of your children. So we are going to make a start with helping kids to feel happy. Please stay tuned till the end because we will be answering live questions from parents who have joined us today based on this topic. Okay.
So before we can help our children or our kids to feel happy, Karis, I suppose we need to understand what things are going to help us with this, and actually what does happiness feel like and look like for our children. So I'm just wondering, in your opinion, kind of what do you think is key for a child's happiness?
Okay, the reason that we've done this Tonnau Talks today is because happiness to our children is so important. As parents, that's what we want our children, isn't it, to be happy and to feel happy. And I think it's really important that we try and understand, firstly, what is happiness? You know, happiness is a very positive emotion, isn't it? To feel happy, you feel it in your body. You know, and what's going on there is that when we feel that emotion of happiness, whether that's joy, excitement, contentment, which is kind of when you think about it on a scale of happiness, excitement might be right there at number 10, whereas being quite content and calm still is happy, but it's actually kind of lower energy in that sense. So it's really important that we think about happiness in terms of a scale, you know, or we sometimes do it with our kids as like a temperature thermometer. You know, being really excited to be up there at the top, with being kind of more, you know, contented and calm is on that lower kind of scale then. But you know, when we think about happiness, not only is it that emotion, but it's also our body's way of telling us that we feel happy. You know, when you feel happy, your body's relaxed, your muscles are relaxed, put a smile on your face, your heart's not racing, your fists aren't clenched, you're not sweating. Okay, you're not looking around jumpy and nervous. You're actually quite calm, actually quite still sometimes. You might be a little bit excited, so you might get a little bit wiggly as a child, but actually it's a really good feeling in your body, like a warm feeling. Now, the most important thing to remember there is that your brain is in charge of this. Okay, so when we're thinking about happiness, our brain controls that. Okay, so when we know through research that when that we're feeling that emotion of happiness, we've actually got some wonderful chemicals running through our body, through our blood system. It's dopamine, which is that kind of happiness, and that serotonin, okay, which also makes us feel happiness. And also then that oxytocin, which is related to feelings of love and security, not necessarily just to sort of, adult relationships in that sense. It's more down to kind of feeling love from a grandparent and feeling safe and secure there, or, you know, feeling that kind of love from a pet, you know, and a parent. So all these different chemicals are really, really key in helping us to feel happy. And ultimately what we can do, which I love the terms like hijack our brains into feeling happiness, we can think of a happy memory sometimes. And because our memory bank is stored right next to our emotional bank in our brain, we can actually think about a happy moment in our life, a happy memory, and actually then have that release of those lovely chemicals which makes us feel happy. that is only a short-term little hijack there for you, Caitlin. There's lots of other ways that we can feel happy, uh, and they're related to many things, like having social interactions, like seeing your friends, spending time with your family, with a loved one. It can be doing an activity or a hobby that you really enjoy. It can be going somewhere new that you want to go on an adventure. So there's lots of things that can contribute to feeling happy. But there's one key thing that I think that we're going to focus on today, because this is something that we can do every single day, every moment of the day, in fact, to help us to feel happier. Unfortunately, our brains are hardwired to feel more negative emotions. When I think about happiness as a positive emotion, isn't it? Unfortunately, in order to sort of keep ourselves safe, our brains do tend to focus on the more negative emotions, such as anger, don't we? We know about frustration, we know about sadness, we know about despair, we know about disgust. Okay, now that is simply just to keep our bodies safe within this kind of very unknown environment of the world. So happiness really is something that needs to be practiced. It's not something that's just going to fall on our feet. Okay, it's something that we need to be mindful of. It's something that we need to think about in terms of ourselves as parents. What makes me happy? How does it make me happy? Why does it make me happy? How happy am I on that scale when I do that thing or experience that thing? And that's really important, because our children will feel a different level of happiness or joy related to different things. So, for example, Caitlin, things that make you happy might not make me happy, and vice versa. And we need to be respectful as well. Some things that make our children happy, we may not think it would make us happy, but that's okay. But also, not to impose what makes us happy onto our children. So, just because it's something that makes you feel happy doesn't necessarily mean it's going to make your child happy.
Absolutely. I think there's so much thought that goes into happiness and what you've just said. We always think of happiness as just being this joyful emotion that kind of we experience, and it comes out of nowhere, and it's lovely while we kind of experience it, and then we spend the rest of our time hoping to feel it. But actually, from what you said there's a lot of things that goes into our happiness that can help us feel happy and can help us hijack our brain, so we can have more of that feeling, which is really important, because we want our children to be happy. We want them to be healthy and happy, and enjoy their childhood and going into their adulthood. You mentioned something about kind of focusing about something that we can do every day and we can practice that can kind of build our happiness. I'm just wondering what that is.
Yeah, so psychological safety. So big term, but what that means, psychological, is all about our brain processes and the thoughts and our feelings and our actions, behaviours related to that. That's what psychological means. Safety is simply to being safe. So when I mean about psychological safety, I'm going to be talking today, and we will be discussing this in terms of risk. Okay. So when I mean risks, the word risk today is often can be perceived as something that's dangerous and something you shouldn't do. However, when we talk about risks in terms of psychology, it's about doing things that you may not have much experience of doing, okay, or that you have not yet done. Now, in order for us to develop into adulthood, children need to take risks every single day. They need to take risks to go to school, because they need to work through feelings of difficult emotions sometimes, because it can be like, oh, I don't want to go to school today because I'm tired, or I'm not feeling great about myself, or I'm not feeling like I can understand the work. So I'm stay at home because that's safer. Okay. The risk is actually going, okay, today's going to be tough. I'm not feeling great. I don't understand what's going on in the lesson. I may have fallen out with my friends yesterday, but I'm still going to go to school. Now that is the risk. It's the risk of actually doing something that you feel uncomfortable with, by bettering yourself. it's very much related to resilience. Resilience, as we know in our previous Tonnau Talks, is about overcoming adversity. So resilience is when you experience something unpleasant and you then can still move on from it and then take more risks in a positive way to be able to develop that resilience as that strength to be able to take on difficult things. That's what resilience is. Psychological safety is that ability to have the motivation to do things that you're not sure of. Okay. So, for example, it's about feeling able to put your hand up in a lesson and ask a question. That takes a hell of a lot of psychological safety to be able to do that. You have to feel able in yourself to ask something that you might feel a little bit ashamed about, but then safe enough in that classroom environment that you won't be ridiculed. Okay, so it's about feeling safe in your environment, whether that's at home as well, to be able to try things that you're not sure of without having such negative outcomes. So, unfortunately, what happens with some children and adults is that we think, okay, I really want to go on holiday. I love being on holiday. It's a really nice thing. But actually, I'm scared of flying. I don't like the feeling of flying, for example, or leaving my home. Okay, so I won't go. Your psychological safety about traveling is very, very low, isn't it? Because you don't feel safe to take those risks of traveling. Okay, so that's what we need to be mindful of, is that taking these risks, when we're going to talk about risks today, it's all about taking steps in order to try new things and to better ourselves. And when we better ourselves, we feel happier. We feel more confident. I feel good about myself. My self-esteem will improve because, yeah, I've done something that I didn't think I could do. You feel that sense of achievement. You feel that sense of belonging with a group of people that you've been able to do something that you previously felt that you may not have been able to do. It could be as simple as taking a bus on your own for the first time. That's a risk, but actually it paid off because you experienced the bus journey, managed to develop your independence, okay, which then you're going to then be able to feel better able to travel on your own and develop those self-care skills. So when we're thinking risks, it's all in terms of good things, okay? But it's really important that we support our kids to feel psychologically safe because it helps them develop their self-esteem, their identity, helps them feel like they've achieved something. So all that adds up to their feelings of happiness.
The sounds of it's really important for not only kind of pushing ourselves and bettering ourselves and doing the tough things for the payoff, but also about being who we are and being open about who we are, which we know is something that's so important for young people, especially when we think about our teenagers, and they're starting to kind of realise who they are in the world. So I'm just wondering then, if so our child, say now we have a child and they feel psychologically safe, right? Okay, what would we expect that child to act like, to kind of interact like, just to be like in the world?
Yeah, good question. So things to be mindful about with our children is that psychological safety is key for their everyday tasks. Okay. So, when I talked about happiness earlier, I talked about things that make us happy, like doing our hobby, being with our friends. However, we can't always do that, going on holiday, eating cake, whatever it may be. So we can't always be doing this, but maintaining psychological safety or certainly building on that can actually help us to feel happier throughout the day, which is far better for us, rather to have that drip of happiness instead of those one-off things that we're kind of seeking. So really, in order for us to see that a child feels psychologically safe, there's 4 things that Dr. Timothy Clark has actually identified, which are really helpful for us to be mindful of. So when we're thinking in terms of being a parent and what we need to be thinking about in terms of ensuring our children feel happy for the majority of the time, these 4 things are really important. So number 1, inclusion. Okay. Does our child feel free to be themselves without fear of rejection? Okay, so it's about that ability for a child to have an opinion, to share their likes, their dislikes, without being rejected for that, without being ridiculed for that. So it's okay that in their friendship group they can say, actually, I support this other team. I don't support the same team as you. I support a different team. And actually feel safe in their friendship group that they're not going to be rejected. And again, in their family, to be able to say, do you know what? Everyone in this household enjoys watching this TV show. I actually prefer a different thing. I actually like to colour or draw in my spare time. So it's about them being able to be individuals and safe within that to be able to share that. Okay. Learning is the second one. Okay. So they feel, because our children are constantly learning, aren't they? Uh, Even when they're not in school, they're still learning, aren't they? They learn from us adults and understanding how to behave, things like that. So not only does this apply to schools where they're learning knowledge and facts, but also at home where they're learning how to develop independent skills, self-care and things like that, social skills. It's really important that our children feel able to ask questions, but also to give kind of feedback about things without being ridiculed. So, for example, they can ask you, well, how did you do that? How can I do this? Why did you do that? What does this mean? Because they need to feel safe to be able to say those things without someone going, oh, for goodness sake, it's this, because that's really important that a child can feel free to ask that kind of what we term as the silly question, that they're all safe questions to ask, that I can say, how do you do that without being told, I've already told you once, you already know how to do that, you did that yesterday. It's about that safety of going, okay, all right, okay, I misunderstood. That feeling of safety. The third thing is contribution. So a child in a household or in a school feels respected enough to make a suggestion. So, for example, if you ask children, oh, what do you think about this? And their suggestion isn't deemed as silly or ridiculous, that actually that helps them to feel part of that connection in that network. And it's really important that we make children feel respected. I often hear the old term long time ago that you've got to earn respect. And actually, children, it's really important they feel respected, because otherwise they won't share their opinions and beliefs, and they won't be able to have an adult life where they feel that they can make a contribution. And that's really key in feeling happy, is being part of something, feeling that they are actually important, because they are. And the last thing is challenge. So again, they feel confident and secure enough to kind of push back. Okay, so not argue back and things like that, but to express that opinion that might be different. Okay, maybe to do something that is new and unique, and that is to be kind of celebrated, and they feel safe enough to do that. So those four things: so feeling included, that they are free to learn and not feel like they can ask any question, that they feel like contribute to the family and school environment, but also find that they can safely challenge without worrying about the outcome of that or the impact of that.
My goodness, there's a lot of things there that young people are kind of contending with and are learning how to kind of navigate when they're kind of developing their psychological safety. So the type of child you might see that are kind of, they feel included and are learning and contributing and challenging, they're asking questions, they're making mistakes and accepting them.
Yeah.
They're engaging with their learning, with their hobbies, they're kind of confidently taking on challenges, they're building those positive connections, they're sharing their thoughts, and they're happy to kind of explore and to play.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the key here, is that all those things that you just said then are the key to happiness.
Yeah.
But also it's all within that psychological safety. So if we can focus on developing their psychological safety, which is fantastic that we can do it every single day, that'll help them feel happy every single day, That can really support our children to have that wonderful feeling of contentness, the happiness, security, and safety. Really, really important.
And it can help us as well as adults, that's the important thing to remember is this isn't just for children, this is any age. So if we can develop our own psychological safety, it's going to have an impact on our happiness.
Yeah, absolutely, Caitlin. And that's a key here that, I've mentioned, in school they learn facts and figures and things. They also learn a lot about social relationships as well and self-care skills and independence. However, our children learn at home what we call through social learning theory, which is all about learning about how to cope with life and copying the adults around them. Now, that is really important that we understand our own happiness and understand how our own psychological safety impacts on our happiness. Because if we are not maintaining our own psychological safety, then we're not providing those essential learning skills for our children. So again, you listed off a huge list there of how we know a child is psychologically safe. They're asking questions. Do you as an adult at home ask questions? Do you show that vulnerability of yourself, by taking risks, by learning something new, by joining a new group? Do you talk about your difficulties and how you're facing challenges and how you want to overcome them? Do you show about seeking support from someone else as well, asking for help? Or are you the adult that's always got it together, never shows any other emotion but happiness? Because unfortunately, your child's not going to learn these essential skills from you because you're not showing how you're getting there. It's like showing the outcome of this amazing cake that you cooked, but not showing your child how you cooked it. You're not showing your child what ingredients are necessary, then showing your child how to put them together correctly in order to have this wonderful cake as an outcome. If you keep showing your child this wonderful outcome all the time without showing those steps, which you explained there about asking questions, showing your vulnerability, then your children's never going to learn from you. It's really important. So when we're thinking about psychological safety, okay, we need to think about not only how can our children develop it, but are we showing it? And Caitlin, I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about how do we go about developing our psychological safety and reflecting on the fact that us as parents need to show it.
Absolutely. So creating and developing psychological safety, this isn't something that happens overnight,
Yeah.
It's something that we need to commit to as parents. We need to show kind of a lot of consistent effort with it, really be mindful about the ways in which we are supporting our children to develop that, psychological safety and, reflecting on our own psychological safety. Kara's raised a really good point there about normalising us as not perfect adults, as allowing a safe space in the home where children can open up and be themselves. Even if they had made mistakes, we need to lead by example there. We need to, normalise asking questions, getting things wrong, expressing our emotions, because we want our children to see that and to learn from that and to feel safer to do it themselves.
Yeah.
Because we want them to be their authentic self. And, home is always going to be the safest place in the world to our children. It is. They're with people who love them more than anything in the world. And so we want to show them that they really can be themselves and that they can make mistakes and they can take those risks. And it's okay. And it's normal. And we accept that type of thing. We don't want them to become so preoccupied with being wrong or doing something wrong that they don't take those risks at all.
Yeah. And you mentioned there that it requires consistent effort. So this is something we have to do every single day and remind ourselves to do it. Brushing your teeth. You have to do it. It's good for your health. Keeping a good sort of track of our own mental well-being is also really important as part of our healthy daily routine. And that's another thing when it comes to psychological safety, isn't it? It's about in our home environments, ensuring that we are on top of that and considerate of Am I thinking about my child's psychological safety here today? Am I thinking about my own today? And you mentioned about that consistent effort and those intentional strategies about what we can do. Can you give us an example of what one of those strategies might be?
Absolutely. So I think establishing family routines is so important, you know.
Okay.
We as creatures, we're creatures of habit, humans, we don't like unpredictability, because if something is unpredictable in that we don't know what's going to happen next and we don't know what's going to happen to us, the brain sees that as a threat. The
Okay.
brain doesn't like that because the brain's main job is to keep us safe. And as adults, we have a lot of life experience. So we have a lot of situations that we know that kind of, if we stick to this routine, you know, if we do this, if we do that, this is going to happen and that's going to happen. You talked about going on holidays earlier, Caris. You know, we know that if somebody was to surprise us with a holiday, we have a little template in our brain that we generally know what a holiday is going to look like,
Yeah.
what's going to happen to us,
Yeah.
what we need to pack, etc., etc. However, some people find if they kind of surprise their children with a holiday, it can kind of have some really big reactions. You know, perhaps we've seen those kind of videos online where the child's kind of hysterically crying and we're not sure if it's excitement, if it's fear, if it's both. And there's going to be that element of fear on it because they don't have that template.
Yeah, and I think for parents, I find a lot of parents will kind of keep these super exciting moments, for happiness, because obviously they booked this holiday in order to make everyone happy. They like to kind of keep them secret because children can get overexcited, and actually parents worry about the kind of the patience of being able to cope with waiting for this holiday to come. So I think a lot of parents will leave it as till the day before. So I know we've seen videos online about those moments, which actually isn't good for the children, because a lot of kids can find it completely overwhelming. And I know you mentioned that people don't know if they're overly excited or really anxious, and I think it's kind of a bit of both. But again, what we need to be mindful of is that unpredictability for our kids. So even though all good intention that we would say, oh, we're going to book a holiday, or we're going to go to a theme park, or you love roller coasters and we're going tomorrow, again, that can be too much for some of our children. We're thinking in terms of their psychological safety, because the environment has become unpredictable. They weren't
Absolutely.
pre-warned of this.
Definitely. And I think it's not even the big surprises either. It can be those little changes in routine
Yeah.
because when we are in a routine, it's so helpful for our brain. You know, we feel safe, we feel secure, we know what's happening. Our children know what's happening tomorrow. They're going to get up, say, at 7:30. They're going to have a shower at 7:40. They're going to have, their breakfast, whatever that routine may look like. And that's why sometimes weekends can be really difficult for children
Yeah.
because they're kind of out of that routine.
And also, it's good to be mindful there, in fact, in just, for example, taking a different route to school in the morning can be very unpredictable for children and can really offset them then for the rest of the day. And that's what we've got to really be important, is that sometimes for us, in our mind, we're going, oh, okay, I've heard this, one of the roads are closed or there's traffic, I'm going to take an alternative route. And actually, I think it's really important for us to explain that to our children and say, look, hang on, I'm going to take a different route today. Some kids don't need that level of predictability to be kind of explicitly told to them. Some kids are, quite easygoing in that sense, but some children might need to be told about these small changes, as we said, because that can really, really upset that kind of status quo of the psychological safety. Even having a new teacher, maybe with their teacher's off sick, and actually having the new teacher step in can be really upsetting for some of our kids.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there, Kat. It was kind of talking about preparation.
Yeah.
It is about we're going to have change in our routine. It's a very natural, normal part of life, but it is about that preparation. It's about letting our children know, letting them know that they are safe, that everything's going to be fine. This is just going to change. With some of our children, if they've got a good developed sense of kind of psychological safety, they might actually ask you why something's changed. That thinking about that child in the back seat going, "Oh, where are we going?" Because you've gone a different way.
Yeah.
So, even if you perhaps don't think to prepare them, they'll often remind you as well. And it's not about, like we said, about not having those changes in life, because life can be unpredictable. It's about that preparation and about that ability to cope with those changes.
And also, do you know, I think it's really important is taking those risks to be able to say, do you know what? Today I'm going to take a different route, or I'm going to do something different. And I know that we might feel a bit uncomfortable with that because it's change, because it will help our children develop resilience. And I think still be mindful about, keeping psychological safety. But what we don't want to do is overprotect our children so that they never experience any changes. They never experience transitions. They never experience, drawbacks. Because again, we've got psychological safety, which is really important, but so is resilience. Now, resilience can only be developed through experience. So sometimes you may have to say to your child, we're going to be a bit late today because of the traffic. But that's okay. And it's about helping our children to experience changes in a safe way so that they feel better able to take those risks.
It's about developing those coping skills. I'm thinking about perhaps, if you hadn't a chance, maybe go and look at our Raising Resilient Children kind of podcast that we've done, because we can't always take the element of risk out of life. We can't. In fact, not even we can't always. We can. There are going to be risks in life, and we're going to have to take risk. And like Cara said, there are things that are risks in life we don't even think of as being risks. Talking to a new person, kind of wearing a dress on prom if perhaps you're not comfortable wearing dresses before, starting a new school. All of these things are risks. And all of these things are going to happen. But what we need to be able to do is, and some of them might go wrong. That's another point. And what we need to be able to do is our children to be able to cope. That actually taking the risk in itself, like I'm confident I'm able to do that, I'm able to cope with it. But then also if it goes wrong, which sometimes it will, being able to employ those kind of coping skills, like that deep breathing or grounding or listening to music, whatever it may be that works for them, to be able to deal with those negative emotions, the situation, because we can't take those negative emotions away. They are going to feel disappointment, they are going to feel frustration, sadness, etc. But we need to empower them to take those risks and to cope with them.
And the key there, Caitlin, is they learn from watching you cope with difficulties.
Oh, definitely.
Cope with difficulties that don't always pay off as well, those risks, isn't it? Because sometimes we are going to take risks when, we're going to try for a new job and we're not going to be successful. And that's a huge risk. But we're then going to say that I'm going to try again for a different job, but I'm going to change something, and it's about our children seeing us do those things, because if they can't see us doing them, they'll never be able to see themselves doing them. And it's no good saying, oh, I was like you as a kid. I was a bit of a worrier. That's not helpful. They need to see how you cope with those feelings of worry now, live in that sense. And I will just put a little caveat here, is that we've got to be mindful of not oversharing. It's got to be appropriate kind of level of sharing when we're talking about sharing our experiences with our children. But it's really important that we do try and verbalise and talk through any problems that we've faced and how we're going to overcome them, and even asking them for some input, because again, that helps them feel psychologically safe within our home environment, because we're respecting their opinion. Even though we may not take their advice, it's nice for them to feel listened to and valued, and that all is part of that developing their psychological safety.
Definitely. I think hearing you, talking it through, and kind of seeing, you modelling that psychological safety, and you encouraging them to kind of encounter risks, that they can manage, stuff like that, it's going to take the power away from the risk. It's going to make the risk seem smaller and more manageable, and they're going to be more likely to take those risks. And then when those risks pay off, it's going to increase their happiness. One thing I will say though, however, is, if those risks do go wrong, and they will, like I said, and we want to help them cope with those negative emotions. One thing that Dr. Porges has identified as being really helpful is familiarity. Dr. Porges said that, what we often do when we're stressed or anxious is distract ourselves or create novelty. We'll say, let's go to the park or let's try something different. But what we need to understand is that the nervous system is really requesting familiarity and predictability, which is a metaphor for safety. And I think that's a really important quote. When our children are finding things tough, we don't necessarily want to distract them or create novelty and stuff like that. We want to rely on that predictability, that familiarity, your favourite films, your favourite songs, your favourite places, to reinstall that sense of safety. So that can be something that can be really helpful to remember as well. It's a way of hijacking the brain, but in terms of promoting those senses of kind of familiarity.
So what you're saying there, Caitlin, is all about acknowledging the pain of the risk not paying off.
Yeah.
So for example, a child comes home from school and says, I got put my hand up in class, got a question wrong, and I'm not going back to school tomorrow. And we'll go, oh, don't worry about it. Everyone does that, in their school life. They would have forgotten about it by tomorrow anyway. So don't worry about it. You'll be fine. Okay. As much as that is often a normal response for us to kind of distract our children away from those horrible feelings of shame and embarrassment, what we really need to do is acknowledge the pain and the shame and the embarrassment. And it's about saying, gosh, I can understand that was really tough. I would have felt embarrassed too. And as much as some parents listening to this might be going, oh gosh, that's just making it worse. Actually not. It's validating those difficult feelings. Now, if I try and convince you out of your feelings of embarrassment, saying, oh, don't worry about it, you're fine, it doesn't take it away. It just makes you feel not listened to. And I think that's what's really important here, is that when a child takes a risk and it doesn't pay off, that we don't try and distract them with, oh, come here, let's watch telly, or come here, let's go for a walk in the park or whatever. It's about saying, do you know what? It was really brave of you to take that risk. And unfortunately, it didn't pay off. But that's okay. And I get why you feel that way.
Yeah, definitely.
And sometimes we don't have to have the answers to say, but you don't have to have the answers as a parent.
No, we can't fix everything. We can't fix their problems, and we're not, always going to be there to be able to fix their problems. It's about kind of empowering them to do that themselves. And I think ultimately what you were talking about there, Cara, is about, acknowledging the pain. It helps them to feel heard and validated. And it reinforces that sense of, I can see who you are and I appreciate you. It's that safety as well. And I appreciate what you're going through. And it's about trying to remain curious as well about their emotions. I think sometimes we're so caught up in what's happening and the situation, and if a mistake has been made, we can sometimes focus more on the mistake rather than why that mistake happened. I think that's something that's really helpful when we're talking about developing psychological safety, is remaining curious about our children's emotions and remaining curious about why they've done the things that they've done, and trying to seek to understand them and what they're going through and what has happened.
Because often, children will take these risks, and they don't pay off. And, I think sometimes we can think we know what they're going through. We can think that we know why they did that. And actually, it's not until we really kind of sit down with them and help our children to feel safe to tell us that we actually really do understand them. And I think that's the key here, is spending that time with your child to really understand, what they want and what they need, but also, what makes them feel happy and why they may have made certain decisions. And often, sometimes children don't actually know. And that shouldn't come as a surprise, because often they're asked, why did you do that? And they just don't know. But that's all part of the child developing brain, because they don't always know. They often react, without understanding the consequences, but also the intention of why did you do that.
That brings me on to, kind of a different point, something that actually we do need to be mindful of when we're thinking about developing psychological safety and we're thinking about coping with risks and all the parts that kind of come into it. What we need to do is to be mindful of our window of tolerance. So this is something that we talk about in psychology. There's a bit of a visual representation on the page, but it's essentially our window of tolerance is our ability to cope. It's our ability to cope with things that are going on in life, to cope with our emotions. And we all have windows. We all have, in fact, we often have sets of windows depending on the situation. And our children are no different.
You're talking about this window of tolerance, yeah? So that is what I would visualize in my head, like a little bubble around me.
Mm.
Okay. So sometimes that bubble is really big, and then inside that bubble is all these lovely feelings where I feel calm, I'm engaged, I'm thinking clearly, I'm alert, I'm not feeling tired or anything like that. I'm actually feeling quite positive, and I'm feeling quite good, and I can take on the demands of the world. So for example, if my bubble is bigger, that means I can take on more challenges because I'm feeling really good and positive today or in this moment. Because like you said, it can change throughout the day, can't it? This window of tolerance. Okay. So if, for example, I experienced something that made me come out of that window of tolerance or come out of my bubble, okay, I can either be hyper aroused. That's where I'm like high energy. I'm feeling a bit panicky. I'm a little bit angry. I'm irritable. I'm really unsure. I can't concentrate on anything. I'm startled about things, and I can be like ripping up paper and stuff, and get really frustrated, and that can be hyper aroused. Okay. Or something can trigger me to come out of my window of tolerance or my bubble, where I'll be shut down. I'll kind of a bit withdrawn. I'll be feeling a bit of shame and embarrassment. I kind of want to hide away. I don't want to talk to anyone. I'm feeling kind of, I just want to be alone. And that's what we call hypo arousal. So that's something to be really mindful about is like those can change. So maybe in the morning I'm feeling great. My window of tolerance is big and I can take on everything that's going on in school. Okay, I've taken on teacher mark in my work, and I've taken on the fact that I put my hand up and I got it wrong in class. But by the time I get home, my window's actually shrunk because I'm feeling a bit tired. I'm moving into that hypo-arousal stage where I'm a little bit shut down. And then my mum or dad tells me, right, I forgot, you got football training today after school. So get your kit on, you got to go. And actually, I can't cope with that because my window of tolerance is somewhat shrunk from the day of taking on all these challenges. And that's something we need to be mindful with ourselves as well as parents, because I might be that parent, I've been in work all day, my window's shrinking, and I've told you that you've got to go to football, and I can see the look on your face. And actually, that's made me irritable. So I've gone into hyperarousal where I'm getting a little bit annoyed at the way that you're behaving because I've got to take you to football. Okay. And again, be mindful about how those interactions then can really trigger. And that's why it's really important, isn't it, Caitlin, for us to recognize where we are in our own state, verbalize that, say, do you know what? I had a really tough day today at work and I'm feeling a little bit irritable and I'm just going to give you some news that's probably going to annoy you. I forgot you've got football training and I can understand if you really don't want to go, but it's really important that you go and let's do this together. Let's try and get through it and then we can get home and have dinner afterwards. And it's about talking that through with your child, going, do you know what? I got it wrong, but I'm also not feeling like I've got it all together. So it's about explaining that to your kids and them to be able to read you as well. So yeah, it's really important that we consider that window of tolerance and how it affects not only our children, but ourselves as well.
Yeah, and how it impacts our sense of safety and the risks that we are able to take. So we've had a look at what is key for a kid's happiness and how we can develop it. What are our top tips, Caris?
Right, so we always like to have our Tonnau top tips in our Tonnau talks because it helps just kind of summarize what we've talked about. Because I know we've talked a lot about this topic. It's really, really important, isn't it? So our Tonnau top tips is number one: be mindful of yours and your child's window of tolerance. We've just talked about that. It's really important thinking about our psychological safety because our window of tolerance is really affected by that. And again, if our window is small, we're not going to be able to feel happy, are we? So it's really, really important that we're mindful of our own window of tolerance, but also our child's. Again, Caitlin, I know you talked about establishing family routines and how important they are to help our children feel safe. Again, it's that predictability, isn't it? It's about our child knowing where they are, knowing where they stand, knowing what's coming next. Okay, that's really, really important. So if you can make sure you have those routines, but also it's important to give our children plenty of notice if there are changes or if there's exciting opportunities coming ahead, like a holiday or a trip away. It's really, really important that we help our children to have that safety of knowing what's coming and making their lives as predictable as possible. The next Tom tip is encouraging your children to take risks. Again, when we talk about risks, it's not about jumping off cliffs. It's all about being able to experience new opportunities for learning. Okay, and helping them to view mistakes as part of that process, because it's really important that kids see what we're doing, what we're achieving, and how we did that. And we can't always show our children how to be perfect, because without showing them the process of getting to a good end, we're never going to show our children how to overcome any mistakes themselves. So again, I'd link it back to that analogy where I said about always showing them this lovely decorated cake that you made. We need to show them the ingredients that went into that and that process of making that cake, and also the process sometimes it can go wrong, you know. So it's really important that we show children that process. We need to remain curious about our child's feelings and not come to the assumption that we know. Again, a lot of our children don't always know why they've made certain errors, because often it's done on impulse and they don't have those ability yet to kind of reflect on what they've done and why they did it and how it went wrong. So again, that's your job as a parent to sort of be curious, ask them those wondering questions. I wonder what happened there. I wonder how you felt. Just to try and unpick it with them in that way that you're being curious. That really does help them feel safe and to help them kind of understand choices that they've made, understand those risks, and understand kind of how they can do those in the future. Okay, and when your child feels unsafe, you need to rely on familiarity instead of distraction. Don't distract your child from those uncomfortable feelings of shame and sadness by trying to distract them. It's really, really important that we acknowledge that pain and that uncomfortable feeling and really unpick what led them to feel that way so that we can be able to support them to problem solve and develop that resilience, because that is the key. A resilient child is more likely to experience happiness than a child who isn't resilient. And please listen back to our other podcasts, especially the one on confidence, then resilience, because a confident and resilient child is going to be one that experiences more happiness. So those are our top tips. So moving on to questions. Caitlin, have you had any questions from our listeners today?
We have indeed. So we've got the first question. Thank you very much for sending this in. My kid is generally happy, but sometimes they can just have a meltdown about small things. Even if I tell them it's fine, not a problem, it keeps happening.
Okay. Thank you for that question. That's a really, really good question. So you basically said that you've got a child who's generally happy. Okay, that's great. But then there's these kind of meltdowns, and I'm wondering if they're kind of those hyper arousal that we talked about in the window of tolerance. So it's kind of getting distressed, irritated, possibly upset. So yeah, those are really difficult feelings, aren't they? When you describe it, when we describe a meltdown, it's not a nice place to be in. And you mentioned there that you have a technique that you try and help the child to kind of distract them from those feelings. And again, I think now after listening to maybe our top tips, you can see that maybe it's about understanding their window of tolerance. So maybe that generally they're happy, and that's really good, and they're in that window of tolerance. And maybe then thinking that whatever it may be, that trigger might have just pushed them over into that hypo-aroused stage or hyper-aroused stage where they kind of disengaged, they're not happy, they're kind of just feeling a bit distressed, maybe they're a bit withdrawn. And it's really important that we try and support them to experience that, because we can't always protect them. And it's important not to protect our children from those difficult feelings, because that's not actually something we can do. And actually, in the long run, it's not something that's very helpful. What we need to do there is help them to understand where they're feeling, where they are. Are they feeling distressed, irritated, agitated, or are they feeling sad and want to feel be alone? So it's understanding, okay, what is their kind of feeling that they want to go to in order to cope with whatever the trigger may be. And it's about us validating those feelings. Okay, it's all about, I understand that you feel that way. I understand that you feel embarrassed, or I understand that you feel irritated by that, so that they feel that they're not alone with it. And also it helps them with that psychological safety of being part of the tribe, of the family, isn't it? About, yeah, I get that, and also it's about understanding how they can overcome that in supported ways, about that problem solving. I would also wonder as well how you cope at home as a parent, whether or not you've always got it together, which, is it's great, but it's not in the same sense. In that sense, we need to help our children to see where we experience difficulties, and see how we cope with them, and see how that we problem solve from them. So I think that's really important. I would certainly remain curious, again, exploring your child's sort of perceptions, because it might not be that one thing that pushed them over the edge. It might be a range of things that they've been coping with throughout the day, and actually that has led them to kind of have this meltdown. So don't always assume that it's something that you said or did which immediately triggered that, because our brains are very complex. Our children can cope with a lot of things. Unfortunately, it does build up when we think about our pot, the way we're filling it full of these negative experiences throughout the day, and actually it can overfill. And it's really, really important that we help our children to feel safe and feel that psychological safety, that they can be able to talk through those issues with you in order for them to be able to overcome them. But having a meltdown is a common thing, is an expected thing. So don't ever feel that it's a bad thing. It's actually a learning opportunity for your child. And it also tells you a lot about where they may be feeling that they're not psychologically safe.
Mm.
Any more questions?
Yeah, so we've had a second one come in. So my kid can't cope on the weekends. We often go out and do things they want to, but they just stress out and become really overwhelmed.
Oh, okay. So yeah, again, this is certainly related to psychological safety again. So what we're hearing there is a parent does things that the child likes, so they know that they like on the weekends, but sometimes the child can become overwhelmed and kind of upset. So again, I would wonder whether or not we need to look back to having those routines in place, or giving our child that predictability. So it's about, even though it's something that they know they like, it's about preparing them for that transition. And again, like you said, Caitlin, in your earlier talks, it was about weekends are very unpredictable. There's sometimes no routine, which sometimes we can really look forward to that, not having a routine. Sometimes it's really important for our kids to have that routine put in place, and to have that pre-warning, maybe on Friday evenings, to sort of reflect on the week, but also to plan ahead the weekend. And that can be really helpful for our children, because even though they might be feeling excited about something, it can put them out of their window of tolerance. So being overly excited can actually make them come out of the window of tolerance, and actually that can spill into other feelings, other emotions, irritability, being upset. So be mindful that even though they may be excited about doing something, it can actually spill into other feelings and emotions which are more negative then. So I think again, having those predictable routines and those plans already be discussed as a family, before the event, so that your child will be best prepared for them, is always really, really helpful. Any more questions there, Caitlin?
So I think that looks like it's it for questions today. Thank you so much to everyone who sent a question in.
Oh, thank you. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And thank you for listening to our Tonnau Talks on helping kids to feel happy. Please don't forget you are welcome to join us for our live sessions, which are held on Tuesday afternoon 12 till 1 every fortnight. If you scan the code on your screen, you'll be able to access our live sessions and be able to follow the links on that QR code. So please feel free to join us, or not, keep checking our YouTube channel for up and coming Tonnau Talks. Diolch yn fawr again. Diolch.
Diolch.